Hello, everyone. This is lesson 25, and we are continuing the story of Octavian's rise to individual power today. What you will need today is to have a handout, the handout for lesson 25, as well as you will need to have read online Augustus's own description on My Deeds, which is a first-person narrative by Augustus, as he was known later on. But I also will provide sections of this text on your handout. Okay, so today's topic is from Octavian to Augustus. And the first most important thing to remember is that these two are the same person. It's just we have here on the left a portrait of the young Octavian, who will become this very successful figure, Rome's first true emperor, if you wish. And that's the process that we are going to discuss today, especially from a constitutional perspective, and also from the perspective of how he is able to represent himself as a rightful figure to take on so much power. So we left off with the story where at the Battle of Actium in September of 31 BCE, Octavian finally defeated Mark Antony, his last remaining rival, and the sort of the only other person who would have been a possibility to beat him in any kind of battle situation. The third time where Lepidus was still alive, but he was in internal exile. And so after this, Octavian essentially has singular power in Rome. You might also recall that when we were looking at the Julio-Claudian family tree, we saw that in fact Octavian's claim to power significantly had to do with being adopted by Julius Caesar as his heir. However, this message, this situation, being Caesar's son, was very much a complicated message, insofar as quite a few people in Rome would have described Caesar as a tyrant, somebody who had too much individual power. Therefore, to say that I am Caesar's son carries with it the potential that some people might just think, well, you're also a tyrant, maybe you should also be killed. So you can see that this created sort of a bit of a situation for Augustus that he had to negotiate. Luckily, we actually know quite a bit about how he did that. And the most important document, and the one that we will keep referring to in today's class, actually comes from this building in Ankara, modern-day Turkey, where on the side of a large temple building, we have the text of Augustus's On His Deeds, or On My Deeds, if you wish, because it's a first-person narrative, surviving. Now, this is a text that we know Augustus composed late in his life, right? So therefore, it is a good way to explain why he did certain things and sort of provide his perspective. But it's also more than that, insofar this is the official narrative of what really happened. So his perspective becomes the official perspective. And so even though this text is from 14 CE, so that is much, much later than the Battle of Actium, if you do the math, it's about 45 years later when Augustus dies and this text is displayed. Nevertheless, it provides a very clear document about how Augustus thought about his own power and what message he was trying to use to sell that power to his fellow Romans. I think before we do anything else, I would like you to take a look at the handout, however, which has this chart on it. Not in color, but still pretty detailed, because I think it provides an excellent summary of what really happened in Rome in constitutional terms with the arrival of Octavian. So on the left in yellow, you see what is the Republican Constitution of Rome. So this is the left side of the slide. And you are very familiar with this at this point. We have a Senate with about 600 members, and then we have various magistrates such as consuls, praetors, and quaestors. And those are sort of the people who rise up in power. And you recall probably very, very well that typically we would have 2 consuls every year, although in this period, given the frequent death of consuls during the year, you might put in someone else if the first person died. So what we get here is sort of the traditional constitution. In contrast to that, on the right, you will see in pink something like the monarchic regime in the empire. And this is going to be the new system. But it's important for you to notice that this is a parallel system. And the key to Augustus's success will be that he will not destroy the traditional system, but instead he will build up his own system in parallel to the existing system, thereby being able to claim that really the system has not changed that much. Now, as a historian, it is very important for me that you understand that that is actually not true, that having a combination of these 2 systems was a major, major change in ancient Rome. So let's look at exactly how this is, what's happening on the right side here. So we have here the figure of Augustus, which is the name that Octavian will take in 27 BCE, who has an advisory council that will advise him. So we see how the whole Senate will not play that kind of advisory role anymore. And he will have a government that is based on authority without any kind of time limit. And so based on his authority, he will be in fact appointing quite a bit of officials, including for financial purposes, as well as for military purposes, including sort of leaders to certain provinces. He will be essentially running a government by himself that will sort of run parallel to the increasingly weaker and weaker Republican constitution. Now, what else also is happening here is this thing here called the Praetorian Guard, which is a new guard instituted for the purpose of protecting the emperor. So traditionally, of course, office holders in Republican Rome always had lictors next to them. These were the guys who had the fasces, you recall those rods and axes tied together, and they would be protecting the magistrates. But now, Roman emperors will have their own bodyguard, the Praetorian Guard, and they will not be stationed in Rome, but right on the edge of Rome, essentially not violating the sacred nature of the city, but nevertheless challenging the idea that no weapons would be allowed in Rome, or that somehow the power in Rome did not require that kind of military protection. So one other way in which Augustus will also be very important is that he will have the power to admit new members into the Senate. So that will give him essentially a way to control who the members are, right? And he will also be able to confirm the authority of the various magistrates. So in reality, there was very limited ways in which somebody could have resisted what the emperor wanted. And very clearly, throughout the rule of the emperors, if you resisted the emperor in various ways, with various levels of legality and with various rhetorical presentations, essentially, most likely, you would be forced either to exile, or you would be forced to commit suicide, or you'd be killed. So it's very clear that you cannot fully resist the emperor. Essentially, he has so much power. Here also we note one little bit that even though the emperor has all this power, he will maintain voting, right? So there will be voting in the Roman Empire. However, the Comitia Centuriata, which is the Centuriate Assembly that does the voting for the various magistrates, essentially will have to pick from people that the emperor already pre-selected for them. So there will be no opposition candidates running for these positions. In historical terms, this unfolded as what I call here an institutional compromise. And so we see that, in the year 28, so this is soon after the Battle of Actium, Octavian issued some coins that claimed that the Republic is going to be restored, meaning peace has been achieved, the war is over, Antony is dead, so we can really, go back to normal, whatever that might be. And so in two sets of reforms that I call here settlements, which is the usual historiographical terms, the first settlement of 27 and the second settlement of 23, we see that Augustus is trying to achieve and sort of constitutional change, mainly by experimenting with different possibilities. And so in the first settlement of 27 BCE, Octavian said, I transfer the Republic back to the Senate. And what he gets in exchange includes the title Augustus, which is not just a word and not just your the name of your favorite month after July, August, but it actually means in Latin something like exalted, right? And that's the name he is going to wear after this, which gives us a sense that he is sort of above an average normal person. He will get various laurels on the civic crown and a golden shield that represent his virtues. But potentially most importantly, he gets a 10-year appointment as a proconsul. Remember, this is after you were consul, you can become proconsul, over the provinces that have the majority of the Roman army. Essentially, he will have the power of quite a bit of authority, but it's not completely unlimited time-wise. Off he goes, 27 to 24, he's fighting in Gaul and Spain, so he's away from Rome, and he still takes on the consulship each year. And this clearly makes quite a few senators very unhappy. Why is that? Imagine that your dream, ever since you have been a child, was to become a consul in Rome, go to war, celebrate a triumph. Well, in this situation, when Augustus now is going to be a consul every year, essentially the positions available are reduced by one automatically, leaving only one other consular position for people to take. So the competition level, essentially 50% reduction of the potential for you to become consul, is what makes people so upset and essentially leads to some plans and conspiracies to kill Augustus. So after he returns from Gaul and Spain in 23, Augustus will be able to introduce a second settlement, and this is the one that will really stick. When he will actually say, I do not need to be consul every year from here out, but what I want is a different kind of package. So let's see what the parts of this package are. First of all, a key part of this is this major proconsular imperium, major proconsular power. What does that mean? That means this earlier 10-year appointment over provinces with the majority of the Roman army will now be lifelong, right? So for the rest of his life, he will have control over the majority of the Roman army. Pretty good deal. And the second piece is he will get the power of the tribunes for life. So you might recall when we started to talk about tribunes that this is something that comes with the idea that you are sacred, your life is sacrosanct, you cannot be killed. and also with the option that you can veto Senate decisions. So it creates this very useful tool in the hands of the emperors, not at all revolutionary anymore, with which they can have both a claim to the sacredness of their lives and as well challenge any kind of legislation that the Senate might come up with that they don't like, right? So that's a pretty nice package. These two pieces, the major proconsular power and the tribunician power for life, those things will essentially become a package that every future emperor will inherit. So when in 14 CE, Augustus dies, the heir will get this package. There will be one more piece to the package that's very critical, and that is that after Lepidus, who you might recall became Pontifex Maximus, died in the year 12 BCE, Augustus also became Pontifex Maximus, and from here on, every Roman emperor is also having this highest priestly title for themselves. And last but not least, in a very interesting move about which we are going to talk more later on, Augustus will also become Pater Patriae, which is the title of the father of the fatherland, which suggests something like that he is a patron to everyone on an imperial scale. So if you recall our sort of discussion of being a patron, you can see that this essentially suggests something like, you know, he is like a fatherly figure. Don't think your friendly 21st century American father. Think someone more like a mafia boss again, sort of like someone who has a lot of power over your well-being and livelihood. And also in the case of Augustus, some suggestions about sort of lifestyle and moral values that we will talk more about. We will pick up the story with what this institutional compromise looked like and how it was represented in lecture 2.